Judging biggest overreactions for NFL Week 1 games, you think you were excited for Week 1 of the 2024 NFL season? You weren't nearly as excited as us. That's because Week 1 is the overreaction Super Bowl, baby. If you just watched the early window games Sunday and let yourself forget there are still 17 more weeks to go, you might be thinking the Bengals are toast, the Falcons need to bench Kirk Cousins for Michael Penix Jr., Sam Darnold is an MVP candidate, and the Saints are going to the Super Bowl. All patently absurd takes, of course, but this is what we live for in this overreactionary weekly space, where we judge a few potential takeaways from the weekend's games as legitimate or irrational. Has Detroit's secondary gotten better? Improving the defense, particularly the secondary, was an emphasis this offseason, but Rams receiver Cooper Kupp still managed to get 14 receptions for 110 receiving yards and a crucial fourth-quarter touchdown. The Lions' secondary also gave up a 63-yard pass to Rams wideout Tyler Johnson to end the third quarter. The Lions did force an interception in the red zone at the end of the first half, but Rams QB Matthew Stafford picked the secondary apart in the second half of regulation, posting 198 of his 306 passing yards over the third and fourth quarters. This will be an area to watch this season for the Lions. Buying or selling Jameson Williams' breakout performance? Buying. After an awkward start to his NFL career, interrupted by an ACL injury and a gambling suspension in his first 2 years, Williams looks poised for a breakout season. It showed against the Rams. Williams caught a 52-yard touchdown in the third quarter, the longest TD catch of his career, and finished with 121 yards, surpassing 100 yards in a game for the first time. He displayed why he is expected to be a big part of the offense this season. Describe the game in 2 words: a tone-setter. The Lions, who entered the 2024 season with Super Bowl aspirations, nearly fell flat in front of the spirited home crowd but closed out the Rams with a strong ground game in the end. Running backs David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs each scored touchdowns, including Montgomery's clincher in overtime. However, it was a rough night for All-Pro wideout Amon-Ra St. Brown, who caught 3 of his 6 targets for just 13 receiving yards. Can the Rams' offense recover from injuries? The Rams lost a key part of their passing game in the loss to the Lions when wide receiver Puka Nacua left in the first half with a knee injury. Los Angeles' offensive line, already missing its top 2 tackles, also lost tackle Joe Noteboom, ankle, and left guard Steve Avila, knee, during the game. The Rams scored 20 points against a good Lions defense, but they might struggle consistently if any of these are long-term injuries, especially on the offensive line. Describe the game in 2 words: defensive growth. The Rams' young defense, playing its first game since Aaron Donald retired and under a new defensive coordinator, held its own for most of the game against the Lions. Los Angeles, without starting cornerback Darius Williams, who is on IR, gave up 26 points to Detroit in a game that went to overtime. The Rams sacked Lions QB Jared Goff twice and intercepted him once in the loss. Buying or selling Tyler Johnson's breakout performance? Buying. Johnson gave the offense some life in the third quarter, with a 63-yard catch and run to put the Rams in position to kick a field goal and get within a score early in the fourth quarter. If Nacua misses time with the knee injury, Johnson should get opportunities as the third receiver in this offense. He finished with 5 catches for 79 yards. Was this the script Coach Mike McCarthy wants to follow all season? The Cowboys got production from everywhere Sunday in what McCarthy would call a sign of complementary football. Dak Prescott threw for 156 yards in the first half, which was more than what 5 quarterbacks had against the Browns in 5 games last season. He also threw a touchdown. The defense was dominant, with Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Eric Kendricks recording sacks. Kendricks had his first interception since 2016. And for good measure, Kevontae Turpin added a punt return for a touchdown in the third quarter. It's a hard formula to beat. Buying or selling CeeDee Lamb's breakout performance? Buying. It's hard to call Lamb's game a breakout performance, considering a year ago he led the NFL in receptions while setting Cowboys records for yards and catches in a season. But he had just a handful of practices to get ready because of his contract holdout, so Sunday might be an indicator of what's to come. Lamb finished with 5 receptions for 61 yards and had 3 jet sweep carries for 25 yards, while playing more than 70% of the snaps through 3 quarters. Eye-popping advanced stat: Turpin is fast. But even on his 60-yard punt return for a touchdown, he did not reach his top speed. According to NFL Next Gen stats, he reached 19.62 miles per hour, which speaks to how well his blockers opened lanes for Turpin to score. It was the Cowboys' first punt return for a touchdown since 2017 and the first of Turpin's career. Turpin reached 19.66 miles per hour on a kickoff earlier in the game. Where do the Browns go from here after an uninspiring debut for their offense? The Browns' revamped offense looked like it has for most of quarterback Deshaun Watson's previous 12 starts in Cleveland, disjointed and inefficient. Watson never got into a rhythm, and an offensive line missing tackles Jedrick Wills Jr. and Jack Conklin allowed 5 sacks and 21 pressures. But is their return from knee injuries enough to fix an offense that showed no signs of improvement in Week 1? Describe the game in 2 words: offensive eyesore. The Browns ended the first half with 54 yards of offense and 1 first down. Watson didn't complete a pass that traveled more than 5 air yards in the first 2 quarters, and Cleveland couldn't capitalize after their third-quarter touchdown drive, turning the ball over on downs twice. Eye-popping advanced stat: Watson was 2 of 11 on passes that traveled 10-plus air yards. With the arrival of receiver Jerry Jeudy and offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey, the Browns were hoping for a more dynamic passing game. Instead, Watson looked out of sorts as his downfield passes went off target and out of bounds. Can QB Geno Smith and the Seahawks withstand a big hit to their O-line? Entering the season, the offensive line was already the team's iffiest position group, and now there's another reason for concern after right tackle George Fant went down with a knee injury. He was quickly ruled out, which is never a good sign. Fant is one of the players the Seahawks can least afford to lose, as they'll be without Abraham Lucas for at least the first 4 games. If Fant's injury is serious, they'll have to turn to Stone Forsythe. Eye-popping advanced stat: Smith faced pressure on 47% of his dropbacks in the first half, according to ESPN Stats and Information. For context, his pressure rate of 34.7% last season was 7th highest in the NFL. He was 1 of 4 with an interception while under pressure in the first half. Describe the game in 2 words: ugly win. The Seahawks are fortunate they were at home against a rookie quarterback making his NFL debut, because under less favorable circumstances, they probably wouldn't be able to overcome all the mistakes they made in the first half. The 2 big ones were Smith's early interception and D. Williams' muffed punt, both of which set up Denver field goals. Are the Broncos ready for QB Bo Nix's growing pains? The Seahawks frustrated Nix and often kept him throwing off his back foot before he wanted to. The reality is Peyton might have to simply run more than he would like because of the rookie quarterback. Nix was clearly wobbly Sunday, an early interception, 2 near misses on picks and 2 sacks in the first half, but Peyton kept calling passes. By halftime, Nix was averaging around 3 yards per attempt on 22 throws, and the Broncos had run 16 times. Nix's best moment didn't come until late in the fourth quarter when he rushed for a 4-yard touchdown. Describe the game in 2 words: a grind. Until Nix finds a better comfort level, the Broncos will have to slug it out on both sides of the ball. And that means they'll have to defend the run better than they did in the second half. Sunday is likely a preview for the Broncos of the kinds of games they'll be in until they find some rhythm on offense. Early prediction for next week: the Steelers will come after Nix a lot. The Steelers' defense, which sacked Kirk Cousins twice and intercepted him twice Sunday, will certainly turn the rush loose to get to Nix. The Broncos might simply have to consider more play action than Nix, who played out of the shotgun in college, is likely to want. But if the Broncos don't slow the Steelers down better than they did the Seahawks, it will be another long day. Should the Chargers be concerned about their offense? In the first 3 quarters, the offense was dreadful. The Chargers ran 6 red zone plays, which gained only 6 yards, as the team struggled to protect quarterback Justin Herbert and create lanes for its running backs. That changed in the fourth quarter when J.K. Dobbins rushed for a touchdown and a Ladd McConkey receiving score closed out the win. Still, the way the offense struggled is somewhat concerning, though much of it could be attributed to starters getting comfortable after not playing in the preseason. Buying or selling Dobbins' breakout performance? Buying. Dobbins was the Chargers' best offensive player Sunday, having one of the best games of a 5-year career that has been hampered by injury. He finished with 135 yards on 10 carries, and his 61-yard rush in the fourth quarter was his second longest play from scrimmage in his career. Early prediction for next week: Herbert will throw for more than 250 yards. The Chargers came into this game with no active receiver who had more than 1,000 yards in a season in his career. That inexperience showed in the first half, as the Chargers struggled to throw the ball, with Herbert's 67 passing yards being the second fewest in the first half in his career. But he did slightly better in the second half, finishing the game 17 of 26 for 144 yards and a touchdown. He will have a much more favorable matchup next week against the Panthers, who surrendered 3 first-half touchdown passes to Derek Carr in their opener Sunday. How can the Raiders get their work-in-progress offense going next week against an angry Ravens team? Stop turning the ball over, for one thing. Fumbles by QB Gardner Minshew, who lost a second-quarter fumble on a pump fake gone wrong, and RB Zamir White, who was stripped in the third quarter as he broke through a hole on a potential big gainer, set the Chargers up for a pair of field goals. Minshew also threw an interception late in the fourth quarter to seal the Raiders' fate. These turnovers were costly against a Chargers team that also struggled offensively. Repeating it against a Super Bowl contender such as the Ravens would be a killer. Describe the game in 2 words: ugly, uglier. A matchup between two of the prettiest, most iconic uniforms in the league deserved better, right? A defensive battle devolved into a game of attrition, and the Raiders' defense, which dominated the first half, finally gave way. The Raiders actually led the time of possession battle 31:44 to 28:16, but some explosive plays by the Chargers late sealed the deal. Early prediction for next week: facing a mobile QB in Baltimore's Lamar Jackson, the Raiders need to sign an additional edge rusher. The Raiders are thin on the edge after moving Malcolm Kuntz to IR on Saturday with a potential season-ending knee injury at practice, then losing Tyree Wilson to a knee injury Sunday. The Raiders finished with only 3 defensive ends: Max Crosby, practice squad call-up Charles Snowden, and Janarius Robinson, and will need to scour the waiver wire for reinforcements, especially if Wilson's injury causes him to miss additional games. What will the secondary look like in Week 2 at Detroit? The defense played well in the opening victory, but it finished with just one healthy corner in Jamal Dean. Zian McCullum, concussion; Josh Hayes, ankle; and Bryce Hall, ankle, all left with injuries. Nickelback/safety Christian Izien stepped in. Outside of Izien, rookie undrafted free agent Tyreek Funderburk would be next up, and he was inactive Sunday. Biggest hole in the game plan: stopping Commanders QB Daniels on the ground. All week, Bucs defenders talked about the need to contain Daniels in the pocket, and yet he gashed them on runs of 16, 22, and 12 yards on a single drive in the second quarter. The Bucs chose not to deploy a spy on Daniels, despite the rookie rushing for 1,134 yards last season at LSU. He finished with 88 yards and 2 touchdowns on 16 carries. Buying or selling offensive coordinator Liam Cohen's breakout performance? Buying. The Bucs punted just once all game. Mayfield threw 2 touchdowns to Mike Evans, along with TDs to Chris Godwin and rookie Jalen McMillan. Godwin looked reinvigorated back in the slot and was a third-down machine, and the 1-2 punch of Rackett White and Bucky Irving averaged 5.76 yards per touch. Had one offensive play for more than 30 yards, and it came off a short pass to Brian Robinson Jr. The receivers struggled to get open and the running game had a few holes. Washington made a big deal of not wanting Daniels to do too much, but he'll have to continue to do more than desired if those around him don't improve. It's a bad formula. Describe the game in 2 words: rough start. The vibe was better this offseason under coach Dan Quinn. But the play was the same as 2023. The Commanders, with only 21 holdovers from last year, struggled to run 50 yards from the backs. The defense was bad on third down, 9-4-13, and kicker Cade York missed 2 field goals. The game was all around bad. Biggest hole in the game plan: the inability to get receiver Terry McLaurin more involved. McLaurin had just 2 targets until late in the third quarter, including a deep ball that was overthrown and should have resulted in a touchdown. He caught his first pass with 3:35 left in the third. The offense is better when he's involved early. Is this Saints offense the real deal? It was a solid debut for Clint Kubiak and the new Saints offense. New Orleans had 30 points by halftime for the first time since the Drew Brees era ended. Taysom Hill was used heavily, Rashid Shaheed showed off his speed and the protection held up for quarterback Derek Carr. Did the Saints simply pile on the hapless Panthers, or will this be the new normal? They'll have to prove that again in Dallas next week. Describe the game in 2 words: no mistakes. Carr had 3 touchdowns, Blake Group made all of his field goal attempts and the defense forced multiple turnovers. The Saints badly needed a fast start in year 3 of coach Dennis Allen's tenure, and they were almost perfect in that regard, jumping all over the Panthers and never letting up. The Saints set a franchise record for most points in a season opener. Eye-popping advanced stat, per NFL Next Gen Stats, cornerback Alontae Taylor had the team's top speed in one of its blitzes, topping out at 20.64 miles per hour. It's a good indicator of how Taylor, who had 3 sacks, could take a step forward in his 3rd season. Are the Panthers and second-year quarterback Bryce Young really as bad as they looked? Maybe worse. The Saints aren't among the elite and dominated in all phases. Young showed little improvement from last season under new coach Dave quarterback whisperer Canales. He was intercepted on his first play and started the second half with another. His new targets didn't help. The defense stunk it up, too. The Saints had a 59-yard touchdown pass on their opening drive. The pass rush was non-existent. The run defense was porous. What a meltdown. Biggest hole in the game plan, failing to set the tone with their rushing attack. Throwing on the first play, an interception, and falling behind 23-0 didn't help. It put more pressure on Young, who was ineffective despite new concepts to get him out in space. Young finished with a 36.2 passer rating, completing 13 passes on 30 attempts for 161 yards, 2 interceptions, and no passing TDs. Carolina mustered only 58 yards on the ground. Describe the game in 2 words: total embarrassment. The 31-3 halftime deficit for Canales was the second largest for a coach in his first game since Brian Flores and the Dolphins trailed 42-10 to Baltimore in 2019. It can only go up from here. Can the Bills extend this second-half performance to Week 2? The Bills didn't have the ball for a long time in the first half, but it was a touchdown drive right before halftime and one immediately after that started to move the game in Buffalo's favor. Quarterback Josh Allen led the Bills to score 3 second-half touchdowns with 9 players catching a pass and 10 targeted. Allen joined QB Steve Young as the only players to score multiple rushing and passing touchdowns in a game after a fumble on the first drive in 4 different games. It took a bit for the Bills' offense to get in a groove and minimize the penalties. Continuing the second-half performance on a short week will be important. Buying or selling Greg Rousseau's breakout performance? Buying. Rousseau's 3 sacks, including 1 strip sack, was a huge start to his 4th season and the step forward that the Bills were looking for from him. Rousseau had a career-high 6 pressures in the game, as his teammates combined for 8. Early prediction for next week: cornerback Taron Johnson left the game with a forearm injury in the first half, and that leaves some uncertainty with a Thursday meeting against the Dolphins in Week 2. The Bills will likely need Cam Lewis to step up in a big way again like he did in the second half against the Cardinals, 8 tackles, as Johnson is a key part of this unit. How do the Cardinals fix their defense in a week? It's not an easy fix, but changes are needed both to the personnel and game plan if the Cardinals want their defense to match the output of their offense. The Cardinals need to find a way to keep the edges contained and prevent mobile quarterbacks from making plays happen in space when the pocket collapses. Arizona gave up 14 plays of 10 yards or more, so limiting explosive plays could be the difference between protecting big leads and losing them. Describe the game in 2 words: big meltdown. The Cardinals had control of the game until 25 seconds remained in the first half. They led 17-3 when the Bills scored a touchdown right before the half. The Bills outscored Arizona 21-3 over the first 21 minutes of the second half, before DJ Dallas' kickoff return helped Arizona pull within 3. Early prediction for next week: Arizona will reshape how it rushes the passer with an emphasis on protecting the edge to contain the Rams' offense from getting outside. However, to get there, the Cardinals could go through some rotational changes on defense, with more playing time for Dennis Gardeck a possibility. Who will start at quarterback for the Steelers against Denver? Russell Wilson's aggravated calf injury gave Justin Fields a big opportunity against the Falcons, which he turned into a 17 of 23 performance for 156 yards. Fields also rushed 14 times for 57 yards. Though he aired it out sparingly and waited until the second quarter to take his deepest shots, Fields still appeared more comfortable as the game went on. The offense, which rushed for more than 130 yards, mostly hummed with Fields, but Steelers starters have not traditionally lost jobs because of injury. Fields' playmaking, mobility and steady improvement throughout the game could challenge that precedent. Describe the game in 2 words: timely defense. While self-inflicted wounds kept the Steelers from capitalizing on big plays with touchdowns, the defense swarmed Kirk Cousins and limited the damage. The secondary got massive interceptions from newcomers Deshaun Elliott and Dante Jackson to spoil Cousins' Falcons debut, and TJ would look to be in mid-season form with a fumble recovery, 2 quarterback hits and a tackle for loss. He had a handful of other would-be game-changing plays wiped away by penalties, too. Eye-popping advanced stat: with the Steelers' offense unable to finish drives in the end zone, kicker Chris Boswell took care of business with 6 field goals including from 51, 56, and 57 yards to become the first Pittsburgh kicker to make 3 field goals of 50-plus yards in a game, according to ESPN Stats and Info. The 6 field goals also tied a franchise record for most made in a game. Will this offense need more time to click than originally thought? The Falcons gave Cousins $100 million guaranteed coming off a torn Achilles to lead an offense featuring top 10 draft picks in Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts. And Atlanta brought back its entire offensive line. But it didn't look like the Falcons had absorbed new offensive coordinator Zach Robinson's system. Cousins threw 2 interceptions, the latter crushing a fourth-quarter drive. The Falcons managed only 45 yards in the second half and fumbled a bad snap to squash a first-half drive. Eye-popping advanced stat: Atlanta worked out of the pistol set on 52% of its plays, according to NFL Next Gen Stats. Cousins had never taken more than 10 snaps out of the pistol in a game during his 13-year career. He was 2 of 4 for 15 yards and an interception throwing out of the pistol. Describe the game in 2 words: in progress. All of the Falcons' offseason changes, including post-camp acquisitions of edge rusher Matthew Judon and safety Justin Simmons, made for an uneven performance on both sides of the ball. The Steelers were 8 of 17 on third down, and things could have been worse had Pittsburgh not had 9 penalties for 60 yards. How concerned should the Dolphins be about their run game? The backfield of Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane was outgained by QB Tua Tagovailoa's 11-yard scramble for most of Sunday's game as Miami's offensive line struggled to open holes for either back. Jacksonville was the NFL's 9th best defense against the run last season, but this was a poor performance for a Dolphins offense that averaged the 6th most rushing yards per game in 2023. Miami's interior offensive line lost 2 starters from a season ago, and Sunday didn't add more confidence in the unit moving forward. Describe the game in 2 words: star-dependent. The Dolphins spent the offseason hoping to diversify their offense and not be overly reliant on wideouts Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Yet Hill and Waddle accounted for 211 of Miami's 400 yards against the Jaguars, including Hill's game-changing 80-yard touchdown to cut Miami's deficit to 3 points. When all else failed, the Dolphins looked to their 2 home run hitters, who salvaged an otherwise unproductive day offensively. Eye-popping advanced stat: the Dolphins' defense recorded 10 quarterback pressures, according to NFL Next Gen Stats. It also recorded 3 sacks, including 2 from Emmanuel Ogbah and Jalen Phillips during the Jaguars' first drive after Miami tied the game late in the fourth quarter. In his first game since tearing an Achilles in November, Phillips recorded a sack and 3 pressures. Can the offensive line hold up? That was the biggest question entering the season, and it didn't change after Sunday. With the game tied and the Jaguars having a chance at a game-winning drive, Otis Anton Harrison and Cam Robinson gave up sacks on consecutive plays. Short yardage was an issue as well. The playmakers are in place for the offense to be successful, especially with the addition of receiver Brian Thomas Jr., but there's no chance at consistency if the line, which ranked 29th in pass block win rate in 2023, continues to struggle. Buying or selling running back Tank Bigsby's breakout performance? Buying. The Jaguars talked all offseason about the need to get second-year back Bigsby more work. They said it last season, too, but it never happened. It did on Sunday. He had career highs in carries, 12, and yards, 73. He also delivered big plays, ripping off runs of 17 and 26 yards. Travis Etienne Jr. is still the lead back, but Bigsby showed he deserves a larger role. It may not be a 50-50 split, but Bigsby will be a significant part of the offense. Eye-popping advanced stat, per ESPN Analytics, the Jaguars had a 92% chance of winning the game before Etienne fumbled the ball inside the 5-yard line that the Dolphins recovered in the end zone. That would have given the Jaguars a 3-score lead. Instead, the Dolphins scored on an 80-yard touchdown pass on the next play, and the Jaguars never advanced past their own 48-yard line on their final 3 possessions. Could the explosive plays allowed become a trend? The Texans scored 29 points, but the defense allowed Colts quarterback Anthony Richardson to have 3 50-plus yard completions. Richardson had a 60-yard touchdown to wide receiver Alec Pierce and a 54-yard score to Ashton Dulin in the fourth quarter. With the long list of Pro Bowl-level quarterbacks on the schedule, it's an issue that could prevent the Texans from reaching their ceiling. Eye-popping advanced stat, Stroud was pressured on 38% of his dropbacks and sacked 4 times. That's something that has to be fixed if the Texans want to keep Stroud healthy throughout the season. It will also limit the effectiveness of players around Stroud in Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell. Buying or selling running back Joe Mixon's breakout performance? Buying. Mixon was the best player on offense for the Texans as he finished with 159 rushing yards and a touchdown. He helped keep the Texans' offense on schedule when the passing game was a little shaky as Stroud finished with 234 yards, well short of his 2023 average of 274. What happened to the Colts' run defense? The Colts allowed their most rushing yards since Week 17 of the 2022 season, 213, an alarming statistic considering Indy's run defense has been a strength. Houston's offensive line consistently moved the Colts' defenders up front and created running lanes for Joe Mixon. That allowed Mixon to average more than 4 yards before contact per rush at one point during the game. The Colts allowed 5.3 rushing yards per carry on Sunday after limiting opponents to 4.1 in 2023. Buying or selling wide receiver Alec Pierce's breakout performance? Buying. The 2022 second-round pick had been maligned at times in the past 2 seasons for his underwhelming play. But as a deep threat who lacked a big-armed quarterback, it was hard to see his real value. With Richardson back in the lineup, Pierce tapped into his deep ball potential and caught passes of 60 and 57 yards. Eye-popping advanced stat, Richardson is the 5th quarterback to have multiple completions of 50-plus air yards in a game since ESPN began tracking air yards in 2006. Richardson's completions to Pierce traveled 58 and 56 yards, respectively. The Colts had hoped to bring back the threat of the deep ball with Richardson's return. And he demonstrated that ability in a remarkable way in his first game of the season. What went wrong for the offense in Caleb Williams' debut? Williams became the first quarterback drafted at number 1 to win his NFL debut since 2002, but he didn't look very comfortable. That was reflected in the first half by 3 off-target incompletions on throws of 15 or more yards and multiple passes that were batted down by defenders. The Bears won the game despite generating just 148 yards of offense and had to rely on special teams, 3 field goals by Cairo Santos and a blocked punt that safety Jonathan Owens returned for a touchdown, and a pick-6 to generate their scoring output. Describe the game in 2 words: late breakthrough. Chicago's defense put the finishing touches on the win when a third-down blitz in the fourth quarter led to a 43-yard pick-6 by Tariq Stevenson. The defensive breakthrough came after the unit, which ranked number 1 against the run last season, allowed Tennessee to rush for 115 yards in the first half. There is plenty to clean up, but the defense delivered at the end. Biggest hole in the game plan: not enough run support. The coaches implored Williams to play point guard on early downs. It's hard to do that when the run game failed to provide the rookie with much support. Chicago totaled 84 rushing yards, 3.8 yards per attempt, and it wasn't until Williams scrambled for a first down in the third quarter that the run game had an impact against the Titans. Where was the passing game after adding 2 big-time WRs? The Titans' passing attack fell short of expectations in the season opener after adding the top free agent receiver in Calvin Ridley and veteran slot specialist Tyler Boyd. Bad protection and a banged-up DeAndre Hopkins were part of the problem. Quarterback Will Levis missed a big opportunity on a deep throw to Ridley in the second quarter, and the offense went cold after ending the first half with a 17-3 lead. Levis finished 19 of 32 passing for 127 yards and a touchdown. He also threw 2 interceptions, and no receiver caught more than 5 passes. Describe the game in 2 words: oh no. That's what Titans coach Brian Callahan was thinking after 3 plays changed the game. The last one was a pick six after Levis tried to throw the ball away. Chicago got another touchdown on a punt that was blocked. The momentum started to shift in the second quarter on DeAndre Carter's 66-yard punt return. Biggest hole in the game plan: special teams execution. The unit was a big problem, which led to 2 scores for Chicago. What can the Patriots do to generate more explosive plays? Without an elite separator among their skill position players, the Patriots' best chance at success is to string together sustained drives and wear down the opposition. That was the plan against the Bengals, and in opening a 10-0 first-half lead and finishing +2 in the turnover differential, they played most of the game on their terms. But this is a tough way to live in the NFL over a 17-game season. Their longest completion to a receiver was to Tyquan Thornton for 17 yards. Describe the game in 2 words: Mayo mentality. The Patriots want to be a hard-nosed, disciplined and fundamentally sound team under new coach Jerod Mayo, and those were the ingredients that contributed to Mayo earning his first career victory. Buying or selling defensive end Keon White's breakout performance? Buying. The second-year versatile defensive lineman/edge rusher, who is elevating into an expanded role following the trade of Matthew Judon, totaled 2.5 sacks. The pass rush, led by White, made life challenging for Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow. Can quarterback Joe Burrow push the ball downfield more often? The preseason carried over into Week 1. Coming off a wrist surgery that ended his season a year ago, Burrow was hesitant to push the ball downfield toward the end of training camp. On Sunday, 16 of his first 20 pass attempts were within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, per ESPN stats and information. In the third quarter, he finally unleashed a deep pass down the right sideline to Andre Iosivas, which prompted a pass interference penalty. Biggest hole in the game plan: planning for Week 1. The Bengals started out stale again. For the second straight season opener, the Bengals were held scoreless in the first half. In fact, they trailed by 10 or more for the third straight season opener and haven't scored a touchdown in the first half of Week 1 since 2021. The chemistry, especially on offense, wasn't there, with the absence of W.R.T. Higgins' hamstring noticeable. Eye-popping advanced stat: at one point, Patriots running back Ramondre Stevenson had more than 24 rushing yards over expectation, per NFL Next Gen Stats. Cincinnati was unable to stop New England's rushing attack early in the game, which allowed the Patriots to build and protect a lead. Is this the real Sam Darnold? In his first Week 1 start in 3 years, Darnold produced one of his best NFL games, completing 19 of 24 passes for 208 yards and 2 touchdowns. Before his arm was hit on a fourth-quarter pass, forcing an interception, he had a passer rating of 142, which would have been a career high. No conclusion should be drawn off one start, but Darnold did everything the Vikings could have hoped for, most notably throwing a pinpoint 44-yard pass to receiver Justin Jefferson and keeping his cool against an active Giants pass rush. It was the kind of game that should remind everyone why Darnold was the number 3 pick of the 2018 draft. Buying or selling Andrew Van Ginkel's breakout performance? Buying. The linebacker didn't get much attention among a flurry of free agent signings this spring, but Sunday showed how valuable he can be to Brian Flores' defense. He recorded a sack and a pick six, sniffing out QB Daniel Jones' short pass while gearing down his pass rush accordingly. It was no surprise to those who have seen him make similar plays in training camp. Describe the game in 2 words: new beginning. The 22-point win was the Vikings' largest margin of victory since coach Kevin O'Connell was hired to start the 2022 season. They have won 20 games over that stretch, but 17 of them have been by 1 score. In a year when pundits have universally picked them to finish last in the NFC North, it was a notable development. Is this a sign of what's to come for the Giants this season? The Giants were blown off the field by Minnesota in the opener. They heard boos after their second offensive play, again while leaving the field at halftime and consistently throughout the second half. The problem is New York and Jones looked very much like last season with their offensive struggles, which included one pick six and another interception. There is no getting past this reality. Next week versus Washington is already a must-win game, or else this season will get ugly. Describe the game in 2 words: profoundly disappointing. How else can you describe getting smoked at home by Darnold and the Vikings? It took the Giants' defense until 1:15 remaining in the first half to force an incompletion. The fate of this team, specifically the defense, rests on its pass rush. Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau combined for 4 tackles, 1 QB hit and no sacks. Biggest hole in the game plan: where were the downfield passes the Giants spent all summer practicing? They didn't attempt a single pass over 20 air yards in the first 3 quarters. They had 6 attempts, 3 completions, on intermediate routes, 10 to 20 yards. The offense didn't look any different with Brian Daboll as the play caller than it did last season with Mike Kafka. Is this what we should expect from RB Saquon Barkley moving forward? It was as good of a debut as the Eagles could have hoped for, with Barkley rushing for over 100 yards and scoring 3 touchdowns. He impacted the game as a runner and a receiver, highlighted by his 18-yard touchdown reception along the left sideline in the second quarter. With top-end playmakers like Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith on the roster, Barkley knows there will be quieter nights ahead, personally, to allow for others to shine. But Friday sent a message to the league that Barkley intends to make his 7th NFL season one to remember. Eye-popping advanced stat: Hurts and the Eagles struggled against the blitz last season, but Friday's performance offered promise that things could be turning around. Hurts was 6 of 8 for 91 yards and a touchdown against the blitz, while also scrambling once for 8 yards and a first down. With center Jason Kelce retired, Hurts has assumed more of the protection responsibilities. He passed his first test. Buying or selling linebacker Zach Bond's breakout performance? Buying. Bond led the way with 15 tackles, 2 sacks and a pair of quarterback hits. His takedown of QB Malik Willis with 3 seconds remaining sealed the win for Philly. The former Saint played mostly on the outside in New Orleans, but defensive coordinator Vic Fangio believed he had the skill set to excel at off-ball linebacker. Early returns suggest his instincts were on point. Can the Packers win without QB Jordan Love? General manager Brian Gutekunst didn't think they could with Sean Clifford as the backup coming out of training camp, or at the very least, he thought Malik Willis was a better option because he traded for him at the end of camp. While Clifford was re-signed to the practice squad, Willis served as the backup in the opener and took the final 2 snaps after Love left injured. Whoever fills in for Love over the next 3 to 6 weeks, while he recovers from an MCL sprain in his left knee, will at least have playmaking skill position players around him, and running back Josh Jacobs, 18 touches for 104 total yards, and receivers Jaden Reed, 4 catches for 138 yards plus a 33-yard touchdown run, Romeo Dew, 4 catches for 50 yards, and Christian Watson, 1 touchdown. Describe the game in 2 words: international injury. The Packers have played 2 games as part of the NFL's International Series, and both times left that country with an injured quarterback. 2 years ago, Aaron Rodgers sustained a broken thumb on the final play of the Packers' Week 5 loss to the Giants in London, and it impacted him for much of the rest of the season. After playing 2 international games over 3 seasons, the Packers probably hope they stay stateside for the next several years. Eye-popping advanced stat: new Packers defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley has preached an aggressive style, but at times it backfired. He blitzed Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts 9 times, according to ESPN Stats and Information, and on those plays, Hurts completed 75% of his passes for 91 yards and a touchdown and scrambled for 8 yards and a first down. Last season, Hurts threw 8 interceptions against the blitz. Is the big play really back? The Chiefs are off to a good start in that category. They had 5 pass plays of 23 yards or more against Baltimore, mostly through yards after the catch. Kansas City should benefit when it gets Marquise Brown back in the lineup. One of its faster receivers, Brown didn't play against the Ravens because of injury. Xavier Worthy's 21-yard touchdown run was longer than all but one of the Chiefs' rushing TDs last season. Buying or selling Worthy's breakout performance? Buying. Worthy scored a touchdown on a 21-yard run the first time he got the ball in an NFL game. He later caught a 35-yard touchdown pass. While he won't always score twice in a game, look for Worthy to have this kind of impact. He won't necessarily get a high volume of touches, but he will make the most of those he gets. Eye-popping advanced stat, wide receiver Rashee Rice, who caught 7 passes for 103 yards, had 69 of those yards after the catch. Quarterback Patrick Mahomes was often able to find him when he was moving up the field with a defender trailing him. How do the Ravens rebound from an emotional last-second loss to the Chiefs? Baltimore has to move on quickly because of its tough early schedule. The Ravens' next 4 opponents combined for a 40-28 record, .588, last season. After next week's home opener against the Raiders, the Ravens play 2 division winners, at the Cowboys and home against the Bills. Baltimore then plays at the Bengals, who are considered the Ravens' chief competition in the AFC North. There's little margin for error for the Ravens, who traditionally start strong under coach John Harbaugh. Are you buying or selling tight end Isaiah Likely's breakout performance? Buying. Likely was QB Lamar Jackson's favorite target in the opener, setting career highs in receptions, 9, and receiving yards, 111. Likely nearly caught his second touchdown with no time remaining to potentially win the game for the Ravens, but his right foot was ruled out of bounds. This performance was a carryover from last season, when Likely scored 6 touchdowns in his final 7 games. Biggest hole in the game plan, the Ravens' short passing game. In the first half, Jackson got rid of the ball quickly in the flats to average 1.3 air yards per pass attempt, which limited big play opportunities. But when trailing in the second half, Jackson began to stretch the field more, averaging 10.7 air yards per attempt, leading to 10 points in the fourth quarter.